Welcome back, everyone. We're here today with episode 2426 of the Cabral Concept. We're here today with a brand new topic, and this topic is on fecal transplants. If you've never heard about fecal transplants, we're going to get to that today because you may be guessing right now what it has to do with. But the big question has come up over the last, few months or so. I've been hearing more and more people talking about it, whether it be for their pet, believe it or not, yes, or humans. Are fecal transplants the next big thing for gut health? And so if you've never heard about a fecal transplant before, essentially what they do is they actually take the feces, which is a bowel movement, right? So we'll call it poop, and they take it from one individual and they put it in another individual. Now, there's multiple ways of doing so. We're not going to get into the how-to today. We're going to get into the why would anyone do this? Well, we have to understand is that the bacteria in our gut. And so let's think about our gut. If you're watching this on video, you can see my buddy Walter here. And essentially what happens is the stomach moves into the first part of the small intestine, right? So food goes down the intestine, goes in the stomach, gets broken down anywhere from 20 minutes to 3-4 hours. Then it makes its way to your small intestine. And so that small intestine is somewhere around 21 feet or so for adults. And then it goes into the large intestine right here, which is about 5 to 6 feet. So when we're talking about changing the actual bacteria, typically we're working with at least the colon to start with. So the colon is where someone could get a colonic and basically wash out a lot of the fecal matter or toxicity or whatever might be in the colon. And again, we're not going over colonics today. But that same ability is able to be transmuted by actually bringing in a hopefully healthier bacteria into the intestines. So what usually happens is that the fecal matter is tested to make sure that there's no harmful based microorganisms, pathogens, negative based bacteria that we don't want in another individual, and then it's transplanted into the individual having the gut-based issues. Okay, well, what are the typical gut-based issues that a person would be having that may lead them to wanting to do a fecal-based transplant? For the most part, it is irritable bowel syndrome, which we've spoken about in the past, and irritable bowel disease. It could even be something like Crohn's or colitis, or for many people, Clostridium difficile, C. diff. And what happens is these people have been dealing with diarrhea, maybe having 5, 6, 12 bowel movements per day, ongoing flare-ups of an inflammation in the intestines, and really difficult to deal with gut-based health issues. Now, I've shared with you in the past what the underlying root causes are to irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel disease, Crohn's, colitis. So again, we know there's underlying root causes, but we also have to keep in mind conventional medicine does not look for underlying root causes. They look to palliate symptoms. Now, before I get all sorts of negative, I don't get that many negative comments, but I understand someone may have tried what they felt was everything in the past, and then they did a fecal transplant and they feel so much better. Good. Honestly, that's what I want for you. So no hard feelings. We can still be friends, and I want you to get the results that you deserve. Like, that's it. So I'm okay with that. My only job is to help alleviate the suffering from as many people as possible, but not just in the short term, but also in the long term. And fecal transplants can work. What I like to say is, okay, let's use that as a last resort, though, rather than the first step in the process. Because here, the science, I still want to share with you what the actual science says. And the actual science does say that there are some potential side effects. And all we have to do, again, I'm not going to talk negatively about fecal transplants. You can simply type in dangers of fecal transplants, fecal transplant side effects. And you'll see that some people, they missed a microorganism. They missed a bacteria that was there that actually then made the person they got it even sicker. Not good, right? Not saying it happens in a lot of cases, but about 85% of these cases do well, and 10, 15, 20 don't, or percentage-wise. But then there's also other interesting things that are taking place when you put someone else's bacteria and that DNA into your body. There's been changes in mood, both positive or negative. There's been changes in overall immunity, positive or negative. So I just want to say, I don't know whether we're quite there yet, but I will share with you the latest study that I did see on fecal transplants and inflammatory bowel disease, because this is interesting. All right. So inflammatory bowel, I'm going to read directly and then I'm going to link this up for you. This is out of the University of Groningen, and I apologize because I am most likely not pronouncing that correctly. But this is in medical research, gastroenterology, and University of Groningen. I don't know where that is. But I'm certainly going to link up the research for you. So if you go to stephencabral.com/2426, I'll link it up. I'm going to give you the highlights though. So inflammatory bowel disease is accompanied by a number of changes in the intestines, such as a change in the epithelial permeability, a change in the composition of microorganisms, and altered levels of antimicrobial substances that are secreted by cell lining the gut. Okay, so I'm going to read and then I'm going to translate it into English. Epithelial permeability just means what we call leaky gut. So inside of these intestines, when there's a lot of inflammation or there's an imbalance, the single cell lining of the intestines, think of a sausage, right? The single cell lining can become more permeable and it can start to let bacteria, proteins, food particles into the bloodstream, causing autoimmune issues and other immune-based issues. Okay, let's keep on going. Excuse me. Oh, University of Groningen is in the Netherlands, and they partnered with colleagues in San Diego. Fantastic. Okay. And I have actually done one of my internships for naturopathy in the Netherlands. Beautiful, beautiful country. All right. So the scientists in this study used the mice in which the gene that is responsible for the production of the antimicrobial compound catastatin was knocked out using genetic techniques. In normal mice, catastatin is secreted by cells lining the gut and kills susceptible bacterial strains. Okay, so what does this mean? So catastatin is naturally produced inside of the gut lining to kill pathogens that shouldn't be there, specifically bacteria that shouldn't be growing in your gut. Now, what happens is, in mice, they can actually knock out the gene that allows for the expression of this natural antimicrobial. Okay, so now they have two groups of mice. They have mice with, they're calling them wild type, so that's normal mice. And then they have mice that have been genetically altered not to produce this antimicrobial. And here's what they did. The mice that had the knockout gene for that catastatin, they could see the bacteria begin to overgrow. Not a good thing, right? So what do? Well, they took two groups of mice. And what they did was they gave a laxative to both groups of mice that would remove a lot of the bacteria. Here's a direct quote, and I want you to think about this. We used a laxative rather than antibiotics because these drugs could hamper recolonization after the fecal transplant. Look at that. Conventional medicine knows how detrimental antibiotics are for the immune system, for the digestion. Many people get IBS or IBD or eventual autoimmune issues or candida overgrowth or SIBO from antibiotic use. I mean, I'm telling you right now, I know that sometimes we need antibiotics. They are life-saving in certain conditions. But if it's not life-saving, again, I'm not giving you medical advice. I personally would never use antibiotics for myself, my family, and again, I can't prescribe antibiotic, nor would I, unless it's, again, so dangerous for the long term. But again, the study quotes that. You take antibiotics, you're potentially damaging your ability to repopulate and grow healthy bacteria. All right, so let me go on. Knockout mice were given feces from wild-type mice and vice versa. After 2 weeks, samples were taken to assess the microbial composition in the intestines. The results showed the composition had shifted towards that of the donor, which means the fecal transplants were successful. Analysis of the metabolites inside the gut showed that the production of short-chain fatty acids, molecules that affect the function of the gut, was reduced in the knockout mice. This was largely restored by the fecal transplant from wild-type mice. Okay, so basically they have these mice that have genetically altered. They have these wild-type mice, and they take the healthy bacteria from the wild-type mice, and they donate it, because that's the donor, to the knockout mice, the mice without the good, healthy bacteria. And lo and behold, the healthy bacteria began to repopulate the gut, and it created good microbial balance. Fantastic. Let's go on. So the reduction in short-chain fatty acid production was the result of the change in the microbial community in the intestines, which was in turn caused by the absence of catastatin. Our experiments show that the epithelial permeability of the intestines, which is higher in the knockout mice, that means mice without good, healthy bacteria have more inflammation and most likely, therefore, higher levels of leaky gut, aka epithelial, which just means basically cellular lining, permeability. So that's that. Also, the extent of the fibrosis resulting from inflammation was reduced. So hardening of certain tissues, inflammation of the tissues was reduced in the knockout mice. We'll call it the IBS mice, and that's because they reduced overall inflammation with healthy gut bacteria. Okay, so what they realized from this study was even more so than the fecal transplant working in these mice was the importance of the natural antimicrobial produced by the gut lining called catastatin. Catastatin is what allows for that bacteria not to build and overgrow. Now, in natural health, we would ask why someone wasn't producing as much catastatin. And in natural health, you would hear things like poor food, poor diet, not enough good foods to allow the healthy bacteria to grow, stress, alcohol, antibiotics, birth control, heavy metals, all of the reasons that cause leaky gut. And I have a bunch of shows on leaky gut. And if you've never heard about what it is, and basically there's 4 reasons that cause bloating: parasites, in terms of microbial imbalance, parasites, H. pylori, technically it would be H. pylori up in the stomach, parasites in the intestines, then we have candida overgrowth, and we have bacterial overgrowth. So those are the main 4, but again, stress is a big factor in IBS because we've actually shown this because we run a lot of labs, and when we run these labs, they're like, oh, okay, this person was really imbalanced, now they're healthy, but yet they relapse, and again, this is for like 1% or less of the population. They relapse after something like the CBO protocol, and they relapse months later, and that's because of stress. So when you look at this right here, this is called the ileocecal valve. It's the ileum, the last part of the small intestine, and it connects to the cecum. And you can actually, if you're watching this on video, I just removed that little pocket there. This is actually, it's called the sphincter as well. This is a muscle here that only allows bacteria to move from the small intestine back now up into the ascending colon, the large intestine. The problem is with people with high levels of stress, that ileocecal valve does not always stay closed. That means bacteria from the colon, which was never meant to move backwards into the small intestine, can give someone what? It can give them SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. They gave themselves SIBO from stress, which then can lead to what? Gas, bloating, diarrhea, or constipation and inflammation that then gets labeled as IBS. What does IBS mean with this brilliant diagnosis? Irritable bowel syndrome. Okay, so basically you just told an individual they have irritable bowels. Thanks so much. That's $400 for your appointment, and please be on your way. I just find that, I find it repugnant and repulsive that someone would go in with such serious symptoms and just be told they have irritable bowels. We need to teach people the underlying root causes so that they can actually fix this so they're not dealing with these issues for the rest of their life. I find this very, very important. All right, last part of the study, though, very, very important here. Okay. We could link this expression pattern to a number of microbial species, which are therefore candidates for being responsible for the changes. Again, I went through the microbial species that are negative, and then, of course, the positive ones that are in the study are lactobacilli, Lactobacillus acidophilus, and many others. Okay, however, their plan is not to treat patients with fecal transplants. So even after all this study, the prognosis of the study, the conclusion of the study was not to treat patients with fecal transplants. This process has shown contradictory results in humans, the scientist says. This might be due to the fact that we didn't know what constitutes a healthy microbial composition in humans. So basically what they're saying is, and so again, this is what's missing in previous attempts to restore a healthy intestinal microbial community. It's what they're saying is that this is still a very young process. That inside, so I'm showing, again, if you're watching this on video, and if you're a YouTube watcher, we would love you to subscribe. New videos come out every single day. We'd love to be able to continue this conversation every single day. But your body has somewhere around 30 to 40 trillion cells. Okay, so I believe I spoke about this just yesterday, how amazing the human body is. It basically regenerates 30 trillion cells every 100 days. It's remarkable. So, okay, you're made up of about 30, 40 trillion cells. Let's give or take a trillion, all right? But inside of your intestines, there's over 100 trillion bacteria. So to say that we are in the infancy in our knowledge of how our gut microbiome works, I think is fair. Now, that does not mean, though, we are not able to help people rebalance. It just does not mean that we know the ultimate intricacies of how these bacteria work as symbiotes inside of our own body, right? We know it affects our mood. It affects our energy. It affects our fat burning. It affects our glucose, so many different things, right? That's why it's important that we continue to study this. But we know that herbs such as oregano, clove, thyme, uva ursi, pau d'arco, all of these are amazing antimicrobials that we can use in order to remove a lot of these harmful substances. Then we can begin to repopulate with healthy bacteria, small intestinal first, then large. And we can use things such as a fluorofilm to remove the biofilm that a lot of these parasites and bacteria and pathogens are hiding under. So remember, we know how to do this without a doubt. It is not me creating this. I read the science and then I start to formulate based on the actual science. And again, natural health follows scientific protocols and principles. So I have a whole podcast just on digestion. They're all free. I'm going to link it up for you today at stephencabral.com/2426. stephencabral.com/2426. All my podcasts on digestion. I'll also link up a course for you if you kind of want to shortcut things on how to rebalance your digestion. That's at stephencabral.com/courses. And I believe that, again, with a little bit more seeking, you will be able to figure out the root cause of your bloating and autoimmune and skin rash and migraines and, constipation or loose stool. You will. I really believe that. I dealt with these things in my past. I was able to figure it out. I believe you're able to do the same. Hopefully this was helpful today. Please do feel free to share this episode with anyone you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone.